Hey guys, it's your boy, Ballface8020, back again with another great short story. So I've written this short story it's called Medium Pizza, and yeah, I don't really have anything else to say about it. So I know I'm never going to be able to get it published. It's 6,000 words long, so if you like fiction, you can listen along to this. Medium Pizza by Ballface8020. I was late and I knew it. I looked out through the windshield at the black and dark street before me. I was finally able to make out an entryway ahead, dimly illuminated by my headlights. In front of the entryway was a mailbox with the digits 739 printed on the side. I flicked on the right turn signal and pulled into the driveway. There was the sound of gravel crackling beneath my tires as I slowed the car to a stop. Grabbing the case that was sitting on the passenger seat, I killed the engine and got out of the car and then began moving towards the house. This lady was going to be pissed. I had always assumed that delivering pizzas would be a dream job. No boss breathing down your neck, and you're on your own most of the time. Basically, you just get paid to drive around and listen to the radio. Right? Well, not exactly. With pizza deliveries, getting there on time was absolutely vital. Admittedly, that should have been easy enough, but not for me. But for me, it was proving to be a real challenge, especially when it involved driving in remote, poorly lit areas with which I was unfamiliar, with only my crappy GPS to provide me with any guidance. And if you were late, which I was often, it could be a long, long time before the customer got their pizza. Sometimes the customer would just call the restaurant and cancel the order altogether, although thankfully it didn't appear that this customer had done that in this case. I walked up the wooden steps onto the porch lighting and rang the doorbell, bracing myself for a pissed-off greeting. I knew this customer was a she because the name on the order was Debbie Reynolds. Some seconds after ringing, I could hear from inside the house the familiar clomping sounds of a person approaching the doorway, followed by the click-clack-creak sequence of the door being unlocked and then pulled open. Ms. Reynolds was a nondescript middle-aged woman. She was around 5'3", not fat, but with a medium build, and carrying the additional 20 or so pounds that typically came with making it past your early 30s. She had medium-length hair, which was itself a medium brown color. Medium everything, basically. Her order was even for a medium pepperoni pizza. I wondered if she was planning on eating the entire thing herself. Ms. Reynolds, hello. I'm sorry, I sputtered. I just got lost out here on these back streets, you know? I really am sorry. And I really did mean it. No, I hadn't meant to subject Ms. Reynolds to a late cold pizza, and it was true that I was going to be the one who got shit for all this, likely losing out on my tip for my trouble, by the way. But how was any of that her problem? She probably was already hungry when she placed the order 67 minutes ago, and due to the dumbass delivery driver getting lost, the hot pizza that she was looking forward to eating at 7:45 was instead going to be a room temperature pizza at 8:27. I'd have been pissed too. She gave me an accusing glare. You are nearly an hour late. Did 42 minutes really classify as nearly an hour? I didn't think that was fair. Yeah, I know. I'm really sorry. Like I said, I got lost, I said, while emoting by bending and straightening my knees and rocking my shoulders slightly back and forth. Just 1 second. I couldn't make any gestures with my arms or hands because I was holding the cloth pizza case in front of me. When you deliver pizzas, you put the pizza box in this thermal cloth case that supposedly keeps the pizza hot during transit. I had yet to be convinced that the cases really did much of anything, and I was morally certain that, after such a massive oven-to-customer delay, there was no hope whatsoever that the heat index of Ms. Reynolds' pizza had been preserved. Ms. Reynolds predictably ignored my apology and, in a still irritated tone, asked me how much she owed. $11.37, I replied. That was $8.87 for the pizza itself, and then a $2.50 delivery charge. Since taking the job, I had come to learn that most customers assumed that us drivers received the whole $2.50. Not so. $1.50 went to Fire Steve's Pizzeria to cover their liability exposure, and the other dollar went to the driver. I truly believed that most customers would have tipped an additional $1 if they had understood that. Well, maybe not most, but some of them would have at least. As Ms. Reynolds dug into her wallet to get the cash, I removed the pizza box from the thermal case thing. I still wasn't sure what they were officially called. She handed me the money and I proceeded to hand the box to her. And then it happened. Once she placed her own hands on the side of the box, I don't know, saw it. Call it a vision if you want. Ms. Reynolds was eating her pizza in her kitchen with an open can of Diet Coke there on the table. The small television set in the kitchen was playing a rerun of Dharma and Greg, a show that I knew of, but that I was pretty sure I had never actually seen. Old D&G were just background noise, however, because Ms. Reynolds was ignoring the TV, fully engrossed in reading an article in U.S. News and World Report about the increasingly high levels of microplastics being found in our environment and food supply. The slice of pizza that she had been eating had already been worked down to the crust. Turning the crust sideways, she brought it back up to her mouth and took a big bite. Maybe a bit too big, because soon after, she began to choke. At first, it was just some quiet coughs, but said coughs failed to dislodge the section of pizza crust that had gotten wedged into her throat. Panic began to set in, and she violently jumped to her feet, knocking over the chair that she had been sitting on in the process. She tried to reach into her throat with her hand to pull out the obstruction, but it was buried much too far back there. Still choking and unable to make any more than ineffectual and nearly silent coughs, she staggered across the kitchen to the counter where her phone was plugged into the wall. In her distressed state, unlocking the phone and dialing 911 was not an easy task, although she did manage to successfully pull it off. Let's see. 911, this is Dispatcher Flores. What is your emergency? Came the Latin-tinged accent from the other end. But Ms. Reynolds was still unable to say anything, or really make much sound at all. Really. She tried to cough into the phone, but it wasn't much. Hello, is anyone there? Can you hear me? Asked the dispatcher. Out of all other options, Ms. Reynolds began just pounding the buttons on the keypad, but in doing so, she ended up accidentally disconnecting the call. Sorry, I don't know, because I just ate Burger King before this, so there we go. At this point, the combination of panic and lack of oxygen was giving Ms. Reynolds a sense of unreality, or maybe it could be better described as surreality, which is not an actual word. I am going to die is the last thing that she thought before losing consciousness and collapsing onto the kitchen floor. End of vision. Okay. What the hell was that? Back in the real world, the still very much alive and not at all choking to death on pizza, Ms. Reynolds was staring at me with one eyebrow raised, her expression in equal parts quizzical and aggravated. Are you going to let me have my pizza? She asked. The question was far from purely rhetorical. I was still tightly gripping the pizza box, and she was unable to pry it away from me. My grip was so tight that one of my fingers had punched through the top of the box, which I'm sure Ms. Reynolds couldn't have appreciated. She clearly had no idea what in the name of fuck I was doing. Yeah, sorry, I said, while letting go of the box. Are you okay? She asked warily. I was getting the distinct impression that Ms. Reynolds' patience with me was beginning to wear somewhat thin. Yeah. Sorry I was late, I got lost. Yes, I know, you said that already, she said, and then she turned and began walking away. I didn't know exactly how her home was laid out, but I figured she was probably moving towards her kitchen of death. I stared after her for a few moments and then pulled the door closed. I was still recovering from whatever it was that had just happened, and I remained shaken up. I walked down the porch steps and back to my car. I got in, but I didn't start it. Instead, I just sat there behind the wheel, trying to process what I had just experienced. It was only then that I realized that I had not even offered to give her any change, and she hadn't asked. I counted the money that she had given me, and it turned out that she had given me a $2 tip, which was fairly generous given the circumstances. I still wasn't fully sure where I was, so after I did start the car, I plugged in my piece of shit GPS back in. Despite having just made the drive out here and being guided by the GPS, I managed to again get lost on the drive back to the restaurant. Fortunately, Ms. Reynolds had been my last delivery of the night, so I didn't get in any additional trouble when I finally did make it back 10 minutes late. There wasn't enough room to park in Fireman Steve's parking lot, but I was able to park right on the quiet side of the street. But I was able to park on the quiet side street that was right next to the building. Ms. Reynolds had been my last delivery, but I still needed to return the pizza bag case thing and settle up with the cash register. Fireman Steve's was a decently sized establishment overall. The building even had a second story. But the front corner of the restaurant was a bog-standard corner pizzeria. Employees came in through a screen door at the side, and from there it was only 6 steps to the counter/kitchen area. When multiple drivers were between orders at the same time, the walkway could become quite claustrophobic. Since I was late, though, the other drivers on duty had already cleared out by the time that I had made it back to the register. Okay, maybe back to the pizzeria section of the restaurant had 2 separate registers. One was at the front counter that was used for transactions with walk-in customers, and the other was a few steps away in the walkway where the drivers settled up after their runs. I was greeted by Kelly, the shift manager on duty that night. "Phil, you made it." "Yeah, sorry about that," I said. There is no lighting out there, and I kept missing my turns." Kelly was early mid-20s, short and chunky, with long, dirty blonde hair that she always wore up when she was at work. No idea how she wore it the rest of the time. Her face was covered in freckles, and she had flat, somewhat homely features, but she was friendly as far as bosses went, and she had been very patient and understanding with my failure to master the art of pizza delivery over the preceding 2 weeks that I had taken the job. Or since I had taken the job. She nodded. "Yeah, I know, it's tough." It really wasn't. It was just that I was a retard. But it was nice of Kelly to pretend otherwise. "Anyway," she said, "that lady you just delivered to called while you were on your way back. She asked me to tell you that she was sorry for being rude to you." Although it would have been an exaggeration to say that I had been moved to hear this, I was pleasantly surprised, and appreciative too. It's always nice to get an apology. I had a feeling that Ms. Reynolds probably wasn't so bad if you got her at a time when she wasn't hangry. "Oh, that was nice of her," I replied. "She seemed pretty mad when I left." Kelly rang up the register to determine how much I owed. I gave her the money and told her that I would see her the next night. Leaving the pizzeria and walking back out to my car, I again thought about my vision. Had I experienced some sort of psychic vision of the future? Was Ms. Reynolds really going to choke to death on a lukewarm pizza crust? If so, maybe I could save her. I got into my car, but once again, I didn't start it. I sat behind the wheel and looked out through the front without really seeing the night outside. So should I just call her and tell her not to eat the pizza? Or maybe just to be really careful? I didn't think either of those ideas were going to work. How long ago had I last seen her anyway? For all I knew, she was already dead. Well, if it wasn't already too late, I guess I could call her and tell her what I saw. After all, she herself had clearly noticed something was wrong with me when I handed the box over to her. Yeah, I should do that. But I didn't have her number. Okay, so I needed to go back into the store and tell Kelly that I had lost something in Ms. Reynolds' driveway, and that I needed to call her and ask her if she had it. But what should I say that I lost? Initially, I was going to go with my keys, but then I realized that wouldn't work because if I didn't have my keys, how would I have driven back to the store in the first place? It shouldn't have been hard to think of something, but I was stumped at first, and it took me a couple of minutes before I could think of a serviceable lie. I went back into the store and I told Kelly that I thought that I left my flashlight on Ms. Reynolds' porch, and I asked if I could have Ms. Reynolds' number so that I could call her and ask about it. I didn't actually have a flashlight, but I thought that it was a believable story. In fact, I probably should have had a flashlight. Kelly seemed a bit skeptical, but after a brief hesitation, she looked up Ms. Reynolds' number for me and read the digits out while I punched them into my phone. "Thanks, Kel," I said while putting the phone up to my ear. I turned and again left the restaurant, walking back to my car while I listened to the rings of the phone, listen to the rings. 5 rings and then voicemail. Okay, better try again. I did. Same result. One more time. Still no success. I had been pacing on the sidewalk beside my car while making these calls, but after the last failed attempt, I stood still. Fireman Steve's is on Allendale Road, a busy two-way street. I looked out at the cars zipping past, the sounds and lights of night traffic in suburbia. I wasn't sure what to do. At this point, I was thinking that either this was all a big nothing or that I had been too slow and that Ms. Reynolds was already deceased. Great work, Phil. But what if it wasn't all a big nothing? And what if Miss Reynolds wasn't already deceased? In fact, what if she was choking to death right now as I stood there? Didn't I have to at least try to do something? But what? I couldn't just call 911 and tell them to go to Miss Reynolds' house because I'd had a vision of her choking. No, I needed to get an ambulance there, and I needed it there pronto. The only way to do that was going to be for me to call 911 and say that I was physically present at the scene, that she was choking, and that I needed an ambulance ASAP. I knew that none of this was a good idea, but I couldn't think of any better ones. Okay, here goes nothing, I guess. I dialed 911. 911, this is Dispatcher Harris. What is your emergency? I heard. I was slightly disappointed that it wasn't Dispatcher Flores from my vision. That would have made me feel more confident that I was on the right track and that this whole thing wasn't just some sort of sudden psychological break and that I wasn't about to massively humiliate myself. Yes, my name is Phil Spencer. I need an ambulance sent to 739 Orville Street in Wattsburg. I am here with Ms. Debbie Reynolds, who is currently choking. I have tried to perform the Heimlich maneuver on her, but it hasn't worked. She is going to die if help doesn't get here soon, I said. The dispatcher confirmed the location and notified me that she had dispatched paramedics and an ambulance to the address that I had given her. She then began to ask me a bunch of other questions about who I was and what was my relation to the victim. I guess there really wasn't a better word for it when you think about it. And if I could try the Heimlich again with her, the dispatcher, providing guidance this time. I'll try again, but now I have to go, I said, and then trying to sound as desperate as possible. Please get here as quickly as you can. I don't think she has much time. If nobody answers the door when you knock, just come into the house. I then hung up. Staying on the line wouldn't have done any good. The paramedics should be there soon, and if Ms. Reynolds was A, still alive, and B, in the process of choking to death, then they would hopefully be able to save her, in which case I'd be a hero. I might even get some money, fame, and groupies out of all this. The problem was that if Miss Reynolds was fine, then I was in a world of shit for making a false emergency call to 911. I'd surely be fired and possibly be in some legal trouble. And if the paramedics got there and Ms. Reynolds was dead, oh man, they'd be able to trace the 911 call back to my cell, and I would have some major explaining to do. And I didn't think too many people were going to believe what I had to say. ... Next section. 2 years before the night of the medium pizza, I had lost my job working at an alarm monitoring center. This was during the early months of the Great Recession, although I actually wasn't laid off for economic reasons, rather I had been fired for insubordination. The job market was horrible at this time, so I decided to go back to school to pursue a second degree in computer science. My thinking was that by the time I graduated, the economy would be improved, and that I would have the skills to make it and was then thought to be a relatively recession-proof industry. My return to school would be bankrolled by my long-suffering mother, who I was still living with despite being nearly 30 years old. So over the past 2 years, I'd been going to school part-time while also working various part-time jobs to earn some spending money. Holding jobs has never been my strong suit. I don't do well with authority figures, I don't enjoy teamwork, I hate dealing with customers, I'm frequently late or even entirely absent, I'm slow to pick up new skills, and I just have a general tendency to fuck things up, sometimes to a catastrophic extent. Basically, if you are an employer and in need of help, leave that position unfilled if you must, but under no circumstances should you hire me. I had just been fired, or quit, I honestly can't remember, from a job doing... I don't remember that either, actually. But whatever the case was, I needed a new gig. So I looked on my school's job board, and that's where I saw the ad from Fireman Steve's Pizzeria. I was intrigued, it sounded easy and low pressure, So I reached out to them, and they got back to me right away. They brought me in for a cursory interview where they explained the job to me and then hired me on the spot. Psychic choke to death on pizza crust night was a Tuesday, which meant that I had classes the following day at Walden County Community College, where I was pursuing my comp sci associates with plans to eventually transfer to a 4-year university afterwards. I would not arrive home until the middle of that afternoon. When I did arrive home that afternoon, I parked my car in the street in front of my house. I grabbed the still half-full cherry Coke that I had purchased on the way home. I had also bought 2 Snickers bars, but I had finished them both during the drive back. And I tossed the wrappers down on the passenger and had tossed the wrappers down onto the passenger side floor. I got out of my car and started towards my front door. Before I could make it there, however, I heard the sounds of another car door opening and then being shut. I looked behind me towards the noise to see a man approaching me from across the street. As he got closer, I was better able to make out his features. He looked to be about 40, with a 5 o'clock shadow on his face and buzzed dark brown hair that was noticeably thinner on the top. He was maybe a little taller than average, with a solid frame, although he was clearly carrying a bit of extra weight. And while he looked strong, he didn't appear like he was in good shape or even particularly healthy. He seemed to radiate a sort of tired energy. He was wearing a dark suit that appeared slightly worn, the suit of a cop, not that of a lawyer. Noticing my eyes on him, the man waved. "Phil Spencer?" he asked, still walking towards me. "Yeah." I had a feeling about where all this was going, and I know that they always say that you should never talk to the cops without a lawyer. And that's probably good advice. But considering that my defense against the murder accusation that I was thinking was that was likely to be levied against me was going to be, I psychically saw the victim's future demise by virtue of a magic pizza box, I didn't think a lawyer was going to be able to do me much good. And I was going to need to write my own rule book for this one. "Hello, Mr. Spencer." He offered me his hand to shake, and I reciprocated with my trademark dead fish grip. "My name is Detective Fred Starr. I would like to ask you some questions." "Sure," I replied. "Go ahead." "Oh, not out here," Starr said. "It's best that we talk about this down at the station." "Is there any specific reason that the station is always down as opposed to up?" Okay," I said. "Do you want me to just follow you there in my car?" "Oh, no, you don't have to worry about that," Starr replied in an excessively friendly tone. "You can ride with me and I'll drive you right back afterwards." Sure he would. I didn't know a ton about how homicides investigations worked, but I understood the idea was to have me trapped at the station and unable to leave without asking for a ride back to my house. As I said earlier, I hate authority figures. I particularly hate cops, and normally my instincts would have been to tell Detective Faggot here, You can ask me questions out here, otherwise I'm not saying anything without a lawyer." But I knew I was in trouble, and I felt like this was one of those cases where the more I cooperated, the better off I would be, and the faster this would all be behind me. I was going to be cooperative and cordial. For now, at least. "Okay," I said, "let's go." We began the awkward walk together back to his car. Commenting on the warm, sunny weather, Starr said, "It's really nice out today." Clearly, not much got past this man. I was going to have to be at my best to match wits with this hotshot detective. "Yeah," I replied. "I'm not sure how many of these we're going to have left." From late August through the month of November, whenever someone made note of nice weather, I would always express my doubts about having many additional such days before the weather turned. I felt like it was important to verbally acknowledge this in case the person that I was speaking with didn't understand how seasons worked. We got in the car and I sat in the back. The car was a mess and it smelled like smoke. Starr smelled like smoke too, now that I thought about it. And we largely ignored each other on the drive to the station. I stared out the window, and Starr had a bunch of communications with dispatch using codes that I couldn't understand. The station wasn't far from my house, probably a drive of around 15 minutes at that time of day. Starr parked the car in the parking lot and then let me out of the back. You can't open the back doors of cop cars from the inside. And we began another awkward walk together, this time towards the police station. I took a swig of the cherry Coke that I was still working on. What are you drinking there? A cherry Coke? Star asked. Yeah. That stuff's good, Star said. I'm a fan. We went into the station, and Star led me to what I guess was an interrogation room, but it didn't have the one-way glass that you see in cop TV shows. The room was painted white and had industrial carpeting. The only furniture was a small circular table and 3 chairs. Take a seat, Star said. I did so. I actually need to take care of some stuff before we start. Is there anything I can get you while you're waiting? Candy bar? Another soda? I don't think we have cherry Coke, but we do have regular, Star said. Yeah, I replied. That would be great. I'll take a Coke and a bag of peanut M&Ms if you have them. I'll check. I think we do. If we don't have peanut M&Ms, do you just want the plain ones? No, I hate those. If you don't have the peanut, can I just get a Snickers bar? You got it, Star said, and then he left the room. About 10 minutes later, a uniformed cop entered the room and brought me a cherry Coke and a bag of peanut M&Ms. Of course their vending machine would have had peanut M&Ms. Why wouldn't they have? Well, at least I was getting free soda and chocolate out of all of this. Another 20 minutes after that, Star returned to the room. With him, he had a folder and a notepad. Star took a seat across from me and cleared his throat. Sorry about the wait. I had some stuff that I needed to take care of. It's fine. So, Phil, can I call you Phil? He asked. Yes. Great. You can call me Fred. Yeah, that wasn't going to happen. Star continued. Anyway, the reason I asked you to come down here today is because I wanted to ask you some questions about Deborah Reynolds. Okay? Sorry. Do you know Deborah Reynolds? Star asked. Not really, I said. But I did deliver a pizza last night to a woman named Debbie Reynolds. I assume that's who you're asking about? It is, Phil. It is, said Star. He looked at me for a few moments before continuing. So you delivered a pizza to her last night. Tell me about that. Sure, I said. I had really been looking forward to telling this story. I didn't expect to be believed, but I needed to get it off my chest. I proceeded to tell Detective Star everything about what had happened that previous night. Well, not quite everything. I left out the part about seeing Ms. Reynolds' 911 call while she was choking. I was worried that too much specificity would bury me. My story was already unbelievable enough as it was. I did not want to make it any easier for them to put me in the room while all this had been going down. Detective Star did not interrupt me once while I told my story. When I finally finished, I could tell that he was surprised, and he had been knocked off his game. Star certainly harbored suspicions towards me. He likely had already known about the 911 call that I had made, but nothing could have prepared him for the account that I had just provided him with. Star began to say something and then stopped. He looked away from me and leaned back in his chair. I could see the wheels turning in his head. Finally, he started again. So, Phil, you had a vision, as you called it, in which Debbie Reynolds choked to death, but you didn't say or do anything until you made that 911 call half an hour later? Yeah, I said. Why didn't you say anything to her at the time? Like I said, I was confused. It took a while for me to process everything. I'm still kind of processing it now, I explained. Again, Star looked at me for a few moments. You haven't asked if she's still alive. Is she? I asked. No, Phil. She is not. She choked to death. But you already knew that, didn't you, Phil? I felt my face twitch. This entire experience had been so surreal that I wasn't sure what I had expected to happen to Miss Reynolds. But now I realized that I had already known she was dead by the time I had placed the 911 call. I had failed to call for help in time, and because of that, she had suffered a nasty death. I wouldn't say that I felt particularly guilty, though. I was so shocked and confused by the vision that I had no idea what to do. Once I had finally had an opportunity to gather my wits, I tried to help. I was too late, but that wasn't my fault. So I did feel guilty, but not too guilty. More than anything, I just felt sad. I wish that I could have saved her. How do you feel about that, Phil? Star asked. Sad, I replied. Do you feel responsible? Somewhat, I said. I was confused. As soon as I settled down, I tried to do the right thing. I was just too late. Maybe if something like this had happened to me before, I would have known how to take more prompt action. But I was flying blind. There was silence. Star fixed his blank focused stare on me. Phil, did you hurt Debbie? No. Star opened the folder that he had brought with him into the interrogation room. Inside the folder were photos of Ms. Reynolds' corpse on her kitchen floor. He placed them individually in front of me in a row. The pictures were not a pretty sight. She didn't go easy, Phil. I can imagine, I said. I felt myself tearing up a little. Another pause. Phil, you said that you brought Debbie her pizza at 8:25, correct? About then, yeah, I answered. And yet you didn't arrive back at the restaurant until approximately 8:48, 23 minutes later. So, Phil, Star said, deliberately drawing out my name, the drive from Debbie's home to Fireman Steve's is 10 or 11 minutes at that time of night. Where were you for those other 12 minutes? I already told you I got lost. You said that you had your GPS on, and hadn't you just already driven there a few minutes earlier? Yeah, well, I still got lost. Happens to me all the time, I said. It did not appear like Detective Starr found my story especially believable. For the next half hour, he proceeded to ask me the same questions over and over, trying to wear me down. But I had been telling the truth, even if it was a truth that I myself didn't understand. So I was able to stick to my guns, much to Detective Starr's chagrin. He never explicitly accused me of anything. He merely strongly and repeatedly implied it with his questions, particularly with the million or so times he asked me if I had hurt Debbie, and his frequent demands that I look at the pictures of her dead body. Eventually, it got to a point where I had just had enough. Look, Detective, I said, as far as I can tell, your theory of the case is that I forced myself into Ms. Reynolds' house, forced her to call my work and leave a message for me, and then somehow shoved a crust of pizza down her throat, causing her to choke to death. I did this all for no reason and without leaving any fingerprints or DNA anywhere on her or in her house. Is that correct? How do you know there was no fingerprints and DNA inside the house? I don't. I know that none of my fingerprints or DNA are inside the house because I was never in there. Pause. Then Starr resumed. I'm just asking questions here, Phil, trying to figure out what happened to Debbie. The only people who know for sure what happened to her are she and yourself. I'd ask her, but I can't. She's dead. That leaves you. And let me tell you, Phil, your story of suddenly becoming psychic is not working for me at all. Oh, I get that, I said, but your theory that I killed her has a fatal flaw. And what's that? Asked Starr. My GPS. Starr smiled. We already had subpoenaed for all your GPS and cell phone data from last night. We'll have the data by the end of the day tomorrow. Good, I said, because I would have left Ms. Reynolds' house no later than 8:33. You said that she didn't call the store until 8:37, by which time I would have already been on the road driving away from the house, and my GPS logs will show as much. I didn't unplug my GPS until I got back to Allendale Road, which wouldn't have been more than 5 minutes before I got back to the store. Starr was no longer smiling. Clearly, he had expected to be able to use the GPS to catch me in a lie, but I could tell that he could tell that I wasn't bluffing. The GPS data wasn't going to bury me. It was going to be an airtight alibi. Well, we'll see about that when we get the logs, Starr said, but it was without conviction. He still thought that I was full of shit, but he was beginning to have major doubts that he was going to be able to hang anything on me. Great, I said. You can call me when you get them and apologize to me for all the hassle. Until then, though, I'm done with all this. Am I going to be able to get a ride home? Next section. And that's basically how things ended. Starr called me the next day and confirmed that the GPS put me far away from the scene. He didn't apologize, and I could tell that he still didn't believe me, but I also felt like he was at least beginning to entertain the possibility that I was telling the truth. I mean, what other explanation was there? This was some Sherlock Holmes, quote, when all the other possibilities are ruled out, end quote, shit. I never had another vision like that, or any other paranormal experience for that matter. I never figured out what had happened with the vision that I had. Did I have latent psychic powers? Was there something special about that particular pizza box? I still have no idea. I've accepted the whole thing was just a giant oddity that I would never be able to understand or explain. Oh yeah, and the pizza place ended up firing me. The end. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. I think it's a story that works better if you're reading it than if you're listening to it, but we'll see. At least I'm able to get it out to people, and even if people don't like it, I'm glad that I was at least able to finish it. And yeah, it was. I don't know if I already said this. Based on I've had this idea for a long time. I developed the idea when I was delivering pizzas, and I did have, not the psychic part or anybody choking to death part, but I did have, a lady get into it with me for being late, and she then called and apologized later. And I just remember, I don't know, the idea of like the exchange of pizza causing like a psychic phenomenon came into it. But this was the first time I actually put all the story together and wrote it out. So, I mean, it's definitely crude, and even like with good editing, I think you're not looking at a great story. But I just read a book of short stories and they sucked. So like compared to like other stuff that's out there, I think it's pretty good. That's all for now. See you in the next.